Hi again, everyone. Welcome to my next video, my Operation Epic playlist. If you've seen a lot of my videos lately, I've been talking about the season of Lent. That's because that's what we Catholics are in the church season. We're now approaching the second Sunday in Lent. And so as I discussed before, in Lent usually we're asked to do prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. So I'm going to talk about perseverance in fasting this time. Now, most people, when they think of fasting, they think of abstaining from food or drink, which is certainly part of fasting. And if for some people that's a temptation or an obstacle, I would definitely encourage it. But fasting can also mean abstaining from another form of worldly pleasure. Like some people give up social media, some people give up talking on their phone or texting. And even though I don't normally make this a practice, because I don't want to seem like I'm being overly pious, for your sake, I will make a confession. Yes, hope there's no priests hearing this, because that'd be breaking the vow. I am going to make a confession that video games are what I gave up for Lent. Because even though video games can be used for good, I mean, I've made analogies based on video games for the kingdom. They can also be a major stumbling block. And so, but I'm talking about persevering through fasting. And so to sort of illustrate exactly how hard that is, this right here is called Project X Zone 2 for the Nintendo 3DS, and it just came out today, which, in case you haven't done your research, is February 16th, 2016, and as you can see by like the overt shininess that's reflecting in the camera, and maybe you might be able to see like the little bits of plastic over here. I haven't even opened it. And because we Catholics believe that Sundays are a mini Easter, we're allowed to temporarily abstain from our Lenten fast during those Sundays because they don't actually count in the 40-day equation. And we also see them as like a mini Easter. You know, Sunday is the day of rest. So we also rest from our penance. Sunday is the day that's traditionally associated with the day that Jesus rose from the dead. So we're supposed to be celebrating. We're not supposed to be all gloomy and miserable on a Sunday. That's not to say some Catholics won't choose to abstain for the entire 50 days of Lent. But I'm going to talk about the cool thing about persevering is that when you know that it's only through God that any good things can come, it really makes you appreciate the good thing that you've been given, and then you sort of see it in a new light. Because, like, let's say that I hadn't given up video games for Lent. I probably would have been in this room, in this seat, right here where I'm at, playing away at my 3DS until who knows how late. And I might have missed out on the Bible study tonight. I might have missed out on making this video. It's very possible that I would have really, really stumbled in my faith and possibly even had to go to confession. Because, as one priest told me, things in moderation are fine, but when it gets in excess where you're just like, oh my gosh, is that Phoenix, right? The lawyer? And we've got Crumb and Lucina from Fire Emblem Awakening. Like, if you're any kind of video game fan at all, you'd be ecstatic. But God is more important. God is ultimately better than all of that. Let me put into perspective how much better he is than all of that. You may think, if you're a fan of Smash Brothers or X Zone like I am, you may be thinking, well, Paul, that's like the coolest thing ever that you got 58 characters in one game. I mean, Smash Brothers for Wii U, that character roster is just epic. But think about how much more epic the Communion of Saints is going to be. I mean, you've got how many people that are saints up in heaven that we don't even know? And then just imagine how many more people that are in our lives that have gone before us that we'll be able to reunite with. Like, that's way cooler than any video game ever. Unless they make, like, a heaven simulation, which would be probably amazing. But even that would pale in comparison to the true majesty of heaven. I've found myself kind of disappointed by recent attempts at portraying heaven in movies. Like, I watched Heaven is for Real, I watched 90 Minutes in Heaven, and while they did a decent attempt at explaining what heaven was, it was kind of I almost felt a sense of letdown, because, like, that's it? I mean, heaven is way better than that. And, you know, it's impossible to fully portray heaven here on earth, because heaven is beyond our senses. It's like even the person with the best vision in the world is blind in comparison to how good of eyesight we'll have in heaven. So you may be wondering, okay, Paul, you're rambling a bit. What does this have to do with perseverance and fasting? Well, fasting gets us closer to God. God is in heaven, and that's what our focus needs to be on in life. Is we need to make sure that even if we get temporarily swayed or distracted, that the distraction itself needs to be a way of reaching the kingdom and helping others get there. Now, not to be confused with the teaching the end justifies the means, which, if you've played Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Dual Destinies, there's this group of people that preaches that very creed. They call it the dark age of the law, where they say, well, you know, you want your client to get an innocent verdict, right? So we'll do whatever it takes, even if that means forging evidence, if that means giving false accusations against someone who's actually innocent. No, that's not how God asks us to be. If something is explicitly evil, we must stay away from it at all causes. But if something is, say, a stumbling block or something that may not be directly tied to God, we need to ask ourselves, okay, how can I use this thing that is of the world and use it to glorify God? Because, you know, when God created the world, he said, it is good. When he created humans, he said, it is very good. He gave us what's called intellect and free will. With our intellect, we are able to understand who God is. We're able to have a personal relationship with him. And that's something that the animals aren't gifted at. They sort of just go about our business. But we have the ability to say, well, I see God through... Some of you may even say, like, I see God in the nice, solid craftsmanship of some of these pieces of furniture. Or some of you might say, you know, I see God through... Oh, forgive this little piece of paper here. I see God through pictures like these, where God is a personal friend of mine. But it doesn't always have to be that blunt about it. For instance, this candle I have right here. Now, admittedly, part of it does say Catholic and heart, and words like, we've got pray right there, but there's also words on here that aren't explicitly talking about God. Like, we've got the word connect. I'm sure you can come up with a couple of dirty jokes from that word. We've got discover. We've got reflect. Passion. I mean, some people have described passion as, like, you know, having a vice or having an addiction. You're passionate about it, or being passionately angry. But the question we need to ask ourselves is, are we abstaining from that which is distracting us from God? Or are the things of the world going to be used in, say, the modern day parable? Because when Jesus taught, he didn't just outright tell people what heaven was. Instead, he used everyday objects as a way of proving his point. But if those everyday objects are going to do the exact opposite and take us away from God, we should stay away from them. So, if, for instance, games like these aren't going to be intellectually stimulating for you and can cause you to stumble, then by all means, toss that thing aside. But if you can really, really soak in the kingdom and see it in a new light, and yet at the same time you're seeing the truth, you're not just making something up, then I'd say go for it. Jesus says, make disciples of all nations, and we all know that every nation has a different culture. Sometimes you have to know how to appeal to that culture. So my last challenge to you, to try my best to keep this as close to 10 minutes as possible, is what do we need to stay away from that is explicitly evil, versus how can we take something that could be a stumbling block, but be able to present it in a way that ultimately it leads to God? So with that being said, hope you have a wonderful day. If you happen to be in the season of Lent when you watch this, stay true to your fast, and remember that God will always give back what was given to him. So if you say give up your money at church, well, you can look forward to interest when you get to the heavenly bank. So with that being said, have a great day, keep the faith, stay epic.